item 3, possible action regarding board policy FNCE local. Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, President Byer. Tyler Shoesmith, Executive Director for Pupil Personnel Services, will come up to the podium, but before he presents, Dr. Micah would like to say a few words.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shoesmith, for giving me a moment here to speak while Jason. So, you know, this is one of those policies, folks, that I just want you to know, once again, just like what you heard about libraries, we started doing this before the law mandated it, quite frankly. We started allowing it, and I think the process worked great. Unfortunately, we got a law. I worked really hard this past legislative session to really help lawmakers understand that not everything has to be legislated. Unfortunately, you know, we still have a law that now we have to do it, because what I said and what our campuses were able to do at 16 of our schools this past year was work with staff, students, parents, and reach some good agreements around what it should look like at their individual campus. Ms. Thompson, I know you had a daughter at one of those schools. And the beauty of it was, folks, is I got one complaint the entire year. That was it. And the only complaint that I ever received was when a parent reached out to me and said, I'm all for it. I don't believe my child should be on their phone during instruction. Absolutely. But by gosh, you're not going to take that phone from my child. Because in the event of an emergency, I want to know that they're okay. That was the one complaint. I agreed with them, by the way. You know, I went to Austin to a safety conference. Chief, you weren't there. It was Mr. Duran. But I listened to a story over a tragedy in another state where they had a cell phone and they made kids turn it in, put it in a pocket, and have to put it at the front of a room or whatever. And there was a horrific tragedy. It was a school shooting that happened. And just like I still have my 21 and 19-year-old on Life 360 because I want to know where they are. I'm just a dad. And I want to know what they're doing. Sometimes I want to know what they're doing at 1 o'clock in the morning. Right? And so in this event, that tragedy happened. Of course, media immediately descended. Things started going. And the district pushed out a message that said, we have relocated all of our students to their reunification site. Just like I would do if that were. I would have, my adrenaline would be high. I would be absolutely in a panic wondering where my child is. So that mother pulled up whatever tracking device that they had and watched that phone never move. So that mother came to the conclusion that their child was a casualty in that. So she did what any parent would do, jumped in that car and raced to that reunification site because she wanted answers, only to find her child fine at that site. Because in that commotion, in that chaos, that child left that phone behind. Right before this evening, now look, folks, I just did 4 convocations today that many of you were a part of. But today, right before I came down here, I made a call to a dad from your district, Ms. Thompson, who said, Dr. Mike, I've read this policy. I've got a lot of heartburn. I don't like it. I want to know that you need to reassure me you have some discretion. And I said, I do. What is your concern? And he said, I don't want you taking my phone from my child. You don't understand the anxiety I have in today's world. And folks, let me tell you, one, I hate that parents have that. They shouldn't. But that's real. And he said, I want to know that I can communicate to that child. My child is in high school. Not only that, in that event, because I don't even want to think about it, but I do. He said, I also sometimes know that, hey, Mom was going to pick you up tonight, but guess what? Mom's not coming. It's going to be Grandma. And I need to be able to reach out to her. So I said to him, and I reassured him, Ms. Thompson, that the policy tonight we were bringing is truly doing what you all asked me to do and charged me to do. Listen to our community, listen to our kids as we did all last year through Student Voice. because we ask them these types of things. And the stories I heard from kids about, hey, I'm waiting on a coach from a university to give me a call. And Dr. Mike, I don't get to pick when that call comes. They tell me it's coming at 1:30. And I'm going to need that phone. I want to be able to work with my teacher to say, I've got an extenuating circumstance. Here it is. How can we make this work? Another young lady said to me, Dr. Micah, my dad is not allowed to make personal calls at his work during the day. I'm responsible to call Granddad every day to make sure he takes his insulin. You can't take it. I think those are all very reasonable things. I also know, and you heard it today, from our kids, they don't mind rules. They like boundaries. But they want reasonableness, and they want us to take into account that they too have lives outside of that school. Many of them have jobs that they need to communicate with. So listening to all of those things, folks, Mr. Shoesmith's going to roll this out, because I think this is something that, quite frankly, people have read what some folks are doing, and I think what we tried to do is use what you've charged us through the Balanced District Scorecard of looking at students, staff, stakeholders, and stewardship. Because folks, looking at buying those pouches, that's over $1.2 million. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd much rather put $1.2 million back into the classroom with kids and teachers than lining the pocket of some vendor, right? So, Mr. Shoesmith, thank you for letting me get on my soapbox a minute, but I'm going to, Ms. Shelton?
I have a question, and you may be getting ready to answer it, but your second line says that these are the minimum requirements, and the schools may decide to implement a more restrictive policy. I thought you want me to stop talking, don't you?
Let's go ahead and get through the presentation, and then we'll go to questions.
Ms. Shelton, he's actually going to cover that and the why.
Okay.
All right?
Good evening, and thank you, Dr. Micah, for that introduction. So we will go over House Bill 1481. The first couple items on this slide is the shall. So we have the shalls, things that you have to incorporate into the policy. The mays are things that you have some discretion over. And then the must, things that must be included into the policy that we've provided for you for a recommendation for approval. The overall bill, it has some guidelines as to what we need to have in the language for the policy, things that you have that are obviously discretionary, things you can choose to do, and what we put together, what we believe to be is a rather reasonable policy that is hopefully meeting the needs of all the parties interested. So out of the bill, and I just find the first item a little bit comical because they have put telephone. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to parlay, but it could be possible. I know they may have learned their lesson with House Bill 114 and vapes, and they didn't include old schools cigarettes in that. They elevated everything else, so they want to make sure there could be a possible mode of operation for someone to come in with a telephone. Who knows? But these are the items, and just know by extension, this would also include AirPods or things that are connected to a cellular device that is capable of communication. So when they talk about any other device capable of telecommunication, that would likely also include those peripheral devices, though they haven't explicitly stated that within this bill. The big piece here that we'll move into, and this is the language that we're going to look at for the actual bill, which is the proposed update. Next slide here. So I broke up the bill into a couple different slides so that if you had any questions about each of those slides, we're happy to engage on those questions. This is the same verbiage you'll see in policy, and that just note that TEA did provide some guidance as to what their suggestions might be for a model policy, and we've reviewed that, and they have specifically stated at the beginning of that document is that the district needs to define what a school day is, and so by that definition, and speaking to Mr. Menes and Dr. Micah and Mr. Lopez, looking at what exactly a school day means, that is the instructional time when kids are in front of a teacher, from bell to bell within that instructional period of time. What we're looking at with regards to this policy and our recommendation is that phones would be accessible during passing periods and or lunch, but not during instructional times when they're sitting in front of a teacher. And phones are expected to be off and put away and out of sight. And that is specifically written into this bill, this policy as well. Now, to your question about the restrictive part, because when we get into what a school can do, now we know that many schools already have put together a policy or a local policy for their school that has been in place for the last year or maybe more than 1 year that has been restrictive. So you have a school that says you can't have the cell phone out all day, and you can have it at the beginning of the school or after school. And some campuses have only at lunchtime, and that is based on their community standards. What we're looking at with this policy is based on, we'll get to the disciplinary guidelines and what that looks like, so we do have to have that in policy. But they're looking at what fits best with my community, what fits best with the policy, and ensuring that we're meeting the needs of everyone based on, especially Dr. Micah's examples and the stories he gave. The items that we're looking at here, the requirement pieces, these are super important because these are the things that TEA has identified as what are provisions that we have to include inside the bill. One is looking at kids who have a special education need. It's in their IEP or their 504. One call that I received was from our folks that work with our NETS kiddos, that they work on off-site. They work at different locations around the city, and they take via trans, and they have those apps on their phones, and that's how they schedule their time to get picked up and transported to their work site. And so that's a provision that's been included already. There's a documented need based on a directive from a qualified physician. So that piece looks at our kiddos that may have like an insulin pump or something that requires like a Wi-Fi connection or Bluetooth connection. As long as it's a qualified physician, they're able to provide that documentation. And the other piece has to do with the health and safety requirements imposed by law. So there may be some mass messaging or application that some point in the future we have as a communication method for our students as to alerting from one part of the school to another that they'll need to have those phones available, or an application to that effect. But that piece is in the requirement of the policy. The personal use during non-instructional time, I touched on that piece, which is what we're looking at specifically before school, after school, during passing periods, the non-instructional time, and lunch. Now, like I said, schools can be more restrictive, and that would be communicated, as principals have, to their community as to what those expectations are. And then we have some provisions about what we typically do is like acceptable use policies. Those are already in place for kids to be able to acknowledge how they're allowed to use cellular devices or any communication device. And lastly, to the other point, which is making sure where they're going to be stored. So we talked about pouches or putting them in a container over here. Or when I first heard pouches, I've had some experience with them when you go to a concert, those yonder bags and things like that. My first thought, though, as I think back, is like having to deal with all the different, like when we were doing clear backpacks, and some of them were to a good level, some weren't, and they were breaking. They're having to replace them. And when I did research in other districts, looking at how they were utilizing these bags, there was like a large section of information that was like replacement fees. Parents had to pay $25, or they had to pay $15 for the replacement of that bag. And that seemed to be encompassing a large amount of work of what the administrators were having to keep up with, because if a kid didn't have it and they lost it, or was ripped or purposely ripped, or they were able to subvert it somehow, it became an extreme burden for the schools to be able to handle, because now you have to store all these things and you have to keep track of them. And it became, what I could see, a very difficult and untenable situation for many of these districts. And so the last piece of the policy here, and this was already part of it was already included in our policy, which talks about confiscation of these devices. So phones can be confiscated. They currently can be confiscated now. They used to charge, the law removed like a $15 charge fee for that. It says you can charge up to $25 for but that's not something we're considering. Now, the confiscation of a device, that was also currently in place with regards to the time frame. Like we could we'd not keep a device, but if no one came to pick it up over 90 days, then we're disposed of it. Now in this policy, it changes it to in writing. You have to notify the parent. Typically, there's a call home. Hey, don't forget you have your child's phone here, and it would just sit there. And then I don't think people ever threw them away. They just stayed in the vault forever. They just kind of sit there. No one is willing to throw them away. So there may be some Nokias sitting in a safe somewhere. And then the last piece is like other non-telecommunication personal devices. We have those items in the handbook. So those mostly reference like iPods. Remember the old things that used to just carry music and that was it? So typical like technology
You
like
mean a
that.
Walkman?
I'm sorry?
A Walkman?
Walkman and the CD Walkman too, right? Extra bass boost. All right. And so the last slide here for this topic here is the proposed minimum disciplinary consequences. So the proposed consequences, we have several that we've listed out. They are in no certain order and can be used in conjunction with another consequence. This is not a graduated level, so it doesn't start off with verbal warning first. It could be parent notification, it could be confiscation, it could be one or a combination of those items. But we wanted to be sure that there were some things that were spelled out as to what the possible consequences are. We're not looking at out-of-school suspension for cell phone violations. If there is a conflict that arises from a student that has been asked to hand over their phone, that is not a cell phone violation any longer. That's failure to follow administrative directive. That's a whole other disciplinary issue. So just the possession of a cell phone is not going to constitute like out-of-school suspension, but we have included in-school suspension. And what we've come to find is that talking to administrators, lunch detention sometimes seems to be the most effective because that's when they get to see their friends and it has the most impact on them. That and sometimes the after-school suspension. So those are already working on some of the campuses with regards to cell phone use and like they're violating the policy. And I think that with our campus working with our principals and making sure that they're effectively communicating this information out to them, they've, like Dr. Malka said, only one complaint that they've had. I've talked to multiple principals, shared some of the policy. They have a good feeling about what we've presented here because it does allow them to not have to navigate the community, I guess blowback or, feedback on like, well, I have these specific instances that you didn't take into account. Or like many of the examples that Dr. Micah gave, we have a lot of different things that could happen. Like if a phone's confiscated on a Friday night, you're like, well, okay, well now I don't have my phone for the weekend. Well, most families don't have phones at home. I haven't had a home phone in, I don't know, probably 10 years. Like how is that single parent family going to be able to navigate with that child not having a phone and like not having a graduated scale that, is pretty clear and plain for the students to understand that the principals have communicated to them, so. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
So Ms. Shelton, that exact example that you stated, the non-negotiable is during instructional time, which is the 75,600 minutes. That phone is to be off and out of sight. Unless, as you can see in the policy, a list of those ways. The reason that we are allowing it, that's the minimum, is because we have a couple of schools that actually worked with their communities, worked with their teachers, and worked with their kids and said, we're not going to allow access to it at all. And that community has been okay with it.
My question, though, is I thought we had a policy that says that the schools can't be more restrictive than what we have established. Am I not remembering that? They can be more. Okay.
They
They
may.
They
Not,
may be.
they not shall. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right.
Okay. But again, we want to, we recognize, and as you all went through, like, look, today we listened to 4 different sets of students, right? And each one of them was different because
Sure.
they took on the feeling of their communities, right? We know we're such a large district, they're not all the same. And so what we're trying to do is set that standard,
Sure.
but then allow some flexibility within it, as long as we're working with staff,
Right.
students, and our parents.
I'm aligned, and it makes sense to me. I just wanted to make sure we were within our own board policy. My second question is, does instructional time include extracurricular? So if I'm on the football field or I'm, drill team, is that also considered instructional time and no phones?
No, that's not considered instructional time. Those aren't the counted minutes.
Unless it's during athletic period.
Right.
If it's during the academic day, so we're not talking about 5 o'clock out on the football field.
Okay.
But at our middle schools, a lot of times first period
Is
is
soccer.
athletics.
Right.
Yep, it's out. It's out of sight. It's off. That is not okay. But once 4 o'clock hits or 4:30 hits and they're out on the soccer field, the school day's over, and that's different at that point.
But that's the point where the school can be more restrictive because they can
Sure.
have rules that
So
say.
just remember, we have to report to the state 75,600 instructional minutes.
Yep,
That is where we're telling that's no phones.
okay.
Because yours should be learning, not watching TikTok. All right, to learn what a telephone is or a Nokia. Because we all laughed, and we're obviously all old enough to know that.
Ms. Cox?
Thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciated that. And I'm all for phones not being where they're distracting. But I guess and I know there'll be a lot of unhappy campers on Monday. So my apologies for that. But my question is, so what I hear from a lot of kids is that it's hard because one teacher will do it one way, another teacher will do it another way. So and each campus can do it their own way, which is how it should be. But how do we make that uniform, I guess, as students move throughout the school day?
Right.
Ms. Cox, I think I could attempt to answer that question. So the uniformity is going to be that during the instructional time in any school, we are not going to have our cell phones. They're going to be off and out of sight. That's a uniformity piece. During all instructional, like Dr. Micah said, it's at 75,600 minutes because passing periods, lunch don't count as part of those minutes. And so that's uniformity. It's going to be for some schools that may not have had that provision last year or that rule last year of during instructional time. That's going to be a change for some kids and some teachers. But we do have many schools who already had that in place. So it's going to be a matter of communicating with teachers, communicating with students, communicating with parents. Not once, not twice, but over and over
3
again,
times
just
a
like we
dozen,
do with
yeah.
any other rule.
Sure.
When the whole vaping thing came in several years ago, the same thing happened. We had to communicate, and so we're going to continue to do that, and that's going to be a charge to our principals to communicate in every manner that they can to ensure that everyone understands that instructional time is sacred. We're not using phones during that time.
So just from one of my schools in my cluster, from kids I talked to, one teacher wants it's fine if it's just off and on their person. Another teacher says, here's the basket, put it in there. So that's what I'm really trying to figure out is, will every teacher tell their student, you keep your phone on your person? Because that's kind of the confusing part is each kid has to remember what each teacher wants to do.
Right,
with the
and
phone.
it could be, and that's going to be, one thing that we talk about here is, we don't want to mandate to principals how to run their school.
Sure.
Because we can't do that
Sure.
from central office.
No.
That's impossible.
And we
But
shouldn't,
we
no.
could say consistency is key for kids in ensuring that they understand what is occurring,
Mm-hmm.
and that way they're not confused. So that is definitely going to be one of, the message that we're giving to them. That being said, there may be situations right now where one teacher may say, this is how you do it, another, but as long as they're meeting, again, our minimum standards, and that we're following the law with that, that's really what we're concerned about.
And
Okay, thank you.
and Ms. Cox, I will tell you that the consistency piece is always our challenge, right? It always is. Our message will be to principals, should you all adopt this, is you need to bring uniformity through to make certain that kids, because I heard that loud and clear last year through Student Voice, is that we just tell us what it is, but you can't vary it. My concern with it really is more around substitutes and how they're going to, so we know we're going to have to tackle that bit by bit and make certain that they understand that they can't be providing that access because either the kids, they sit and listen to music or something, or it's a filler, right? No, you can't have it. Like, we're going to have to be, and we really need to rest on our administrators out on the campuses to help us enforce that piece and to train all the folks. This is the best way to do it.
Well, on the bottom of page 1, it says devices shall be stored on the student's person or belongings during instructional time.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't give any flexibility for putting it in a basket or in some other pouch. It specifically states that they're off, out of sight, on their person or in their belongings. And so I think that's the rule, according to how I'm reading this.
My concern is the inconsistency of consequences. That's the grievance that's coming, right? My kid got theirs confiscated. Miss Landry's kid got a verbal warning. Are we doing anything to support consistency in terms of how we discipline students that are not obeying the rules?
First, Mr. Shoesmith.
Please go ahead.
Oh, well, one thing I can tell you, Ms. Shelton, is when we saw, so look, remember, 88th session, they mandated that anybody caught with a vape, you had to go to alternative, right? Gave us a zero discretion. I've heard enough heartburn from parents. Hey, by the way, the ledge obviously did because they changed that law. That's that component of it that we need to allow some flexibility in, to understanding that again, we heard it today from kids, get to know me as a person. Hey, you've never done this before. I'm not going to confiscate your phone because you're never in trouble. Just remember, this is my verbal warning, Miss Shelton, put that phone away. Now, Miss Villarreal, she and I have gone back and forth on this phone thing a little bit, right? I've tried to help her because she's just not complying. And so I may take it because I've had that ability. Our teachers already possess that component to it, where they can individualize some of this and differentiate between a child who this has been a repetitive type behavior and this hasn't. Now, could there be one that takes it a little too far? Yeah, absolutely. I'm a principal. I had that happen to me before. But that's where those administrators come in and say, and have those discussions around, let's talk about reasonableness here, and let's talk about what we're trying to get. Because again, we heard it today, and I apologize, I'm kind of being a broken record, but the kid said, I don't mind rules. Just let me know what they are.
Yes, and
And the principals are, sorry, go ahead.
I trust the principals and I trust our staff. The other thing we heard today was don't judge me because you don't know me. And the other thing we heard today is sometimes people don't seem like they, right? So, and my guess is everyone is going to do this, but the conversation with our teachers about consistency and how we move forward is really important, because the other thing our students said to us today, right? And that's my primary concern, because looking forward, if there's not some level of consistency in the way we implement the discipline, those people will be sitting right there with a grievance.
And Ms. Shelton, if I may, when we look at discipline, especially for the same infraction, which would be cell phones or any other one, we're always looking at progressive discipline. So we're starting at a point and we move through. And even now, before this law, we had principals who had their progressive discipline regarding cell phones. And so that is something that they're going to communicate, again, with their students, with their families, and with their employees. So that way everyone understands that this is how progressive discipline works with the cell phone policy.
Thank you.
Are we going to have any sort of, well, to be frank, you and I have had this conversation when my kid was going to school, and you probably have a few of those Nokias of his in that safe because of him.
Just a couple.
I'm probably more than that, because we had a situation where my husband was critically ill and we never knew when he was going to be, admitted to the hospital or, whatever. Are we going to give any special dispensation to children in situations such as, because he could not turn his phone off. I would have hung him, on by a hook if he would have done that, because we had no idea what was going to happen. So, is there a way that if there is a medical emergency situation, that the teachers are made aware that that phone in that child's backpack may ring?
So one of the things that so yes, and what I will say is that if you look at our proposed update, we do have other identified needs that were communicated to district employees. So it's open there for needs that, again, we couldn't list them all because there could be hundreds of them. The thing that we also have to consider is that we also have to ensure that we're complying with law. So there's a delicate balance there, but I think as long as there's communication between the families and our principals, our administrators, to ensure that these are documented types of situations. And again, in our case, back in 2007, phones were just kind of coming out, the iPhones and whatnot, and it was new to all of us, and anyone thought it was just picked up, and there wasn't really any consideration because we didn't really understand the technology, and I think, quite frankly, we were scared of it, and so everyone's reaction was just to pull. I think now we understand where there are, considerations that we have to look at, and we have to work together to make sure that those situations don't occur.
But
So-
I think it needs to come with the proper documentation,
Agreed.
such as actual
Right.
from the doctors and things like that, showing that it is a medical issue. I don't think a handwritten note from just somebody, it should suffice.
Sure, there's got to be vetting from the administration on these types of instances. I would think that they would be rare, but at the same time, we do, in our policy, we do allow for some flexibility regarding that.
But is it spelled out that it needs to have proper documentation, that is an actual issue? Is it spelled out in?
So our policy, the strategic part of this is more wide open, and then when we start looking at our regulations or even our code of conducts, we can start adding those pieces in there to make it more specific.
Okay, so that comes at a later date.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's also language about, and I think everybody would assume this is for a health issue, that, there's directives from qualified physicians. I mean, so there's language in here that will kind of tie that down, but as Mr. Jimenez said, I mean, there's probably potentially 1,000 different reasons somebody might have one, and that has to be a local conversation with either that instructor, that administrator, whoever that is, and kind of work that out with that
Yeah.
parent or guardian.
And I want to just remind you all, it's, I brought up the whole thing about mandating a DAP placement for a vape, and now they've backed. When things change, right, we put our best foot forward, and we're going to take a look at data and things and what we're hearing, and if we think we need to make a change to it, then you're going to see the policy back here. And we're going to talk to our administrators and continue to talk to kids and parents and say, okay, hey, you know what? I think we need to tighten this up a little bit more, or maybe we need to make this tweak here or there. For us, we don't. We want to start here and then work our way forward and see how things go. If we see a lot of inconsistency in it, then that's something we got to address. That's something we all have to own and figure out why that's inconsistency, and now how do we how do we take care of it and address it so that we don't have that, because Ms. Thompson, that's what we heard a lot, from the students that I talked to from Churchill's. The inconsistency part was hard for them, so we know we need to really work on that, and that's, should you adopt the policy, we're going to have to start to work on that tomorrow.
And I think some of that, going to those student voice meetings, was more about the sort of flexibility of having the phone put away or not put away, I think is some of it. And so in this situation, to me, it's pretty black and white. It says it has to be turned off, it has to be put away. Now the discipline part of it, those are the things that we'll have to monitor and make sure that we're tracking. One question I had is, and maybe I'm either not reading this correctly, but clarify for me. So we talk about allowing them to use it during non-instructional time, but then the second to last bullet says that they have to obtain approval from a district employee to use a personal communications or similar device for personal use during non-instructional time. And so we're telling them they can use it during a non-instructional time, but then we're saying that they have to have approval for that. So under instructional and other use, and am I misreading that? The second to last bullet.
So instructional other use, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I'm finding exactly where you're looking.
So under instructional and other use,
Mhm.
if you know, it starts with
The
a
five
student shall
bullets.
receive, yeah, there's five, the second to last bullet, the fourth bullet says that they have to receive, obtain prior approval from a district employee to use a personal communications or similar device for personal use during non-instructional time.
Right, and so the administrator from the camp, the principal, and their guidelines would then grant them that permission. So whatever the campus sets out as their rules
Okay.
or policies, their local policy
And
would
as we
state
just
that they're allowed to do
discussed,
that.
there are some that don't allow that
Correct.
because of their local discussions and decisions, so.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have just two quick questions. When does the student sign the agreement?
So that will be probably found out later, because once this passed, we'll communicate out to the schools. Some schools already have one in place, some don't. We're expected to have a model agreement come from TEA, to what that looks like, but we'll see when that happens and give them the opportunity to be able to see what that looks like, if they don't have one in place already, utilizing that. The bill, once this is passed, hopefully get this the first day of school, that way they can get that communicated out to parents, and that way they can get it. But it's not part of the acceptable use policy currently that they sign with the student handbook, because it's not currently included with it, but this would be an addendum to that, so.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, say a C-Tech kid misses the bus. I think they typically get housed in the library. So is that considered instructional time, or is that not instructional time?
So can you explain the situation again, just,
A kid, they come to pick students up at various campuses to take them to C-Tech, for example, and say for whatever reason the kid doesn't make it on the bus, and they go to the office and say, I missed the bus. I think at least the way it works on one of my campuses is that they then go to the library, I guess, to be housed or kept there until they can find a way to get them to the campus. So is that time in the library instructional time?
so I would say yes,
Yeah,
because it's not a
okay.
passing period.
Okay.
Or lunch.
Or lunch.
So, yes, ma'am.
So that's the defining, it's not passing or lunch. Okay, perfect, thank you.
And again, that bell has rung to start the next period, so that is now instructional time.
I just have one more question. Okay.
Actually, Ms. Villarreal, Ms. Thompson had a question.
I'm sorry.
I meant to recognize her, and then we'll get to you.
It wasn't necessarily a question, but I've seen this in practice all last year at Churchill, and not everything about it is perfect, but we're trying and going in the right direction for kids, and so I think that's what's important. And there are some things we got to figure out along the way, and that's okay, but it's good for kids.
Okay, I have a question. Are we going to say, because all of us have smartwatches, are we going to say that they can carry their cell phone in their backpack and the smartwatch also has to come off? Or just leave the smartwatch at home?
Yeah, I'll go back. So the smartwatches are included in the prohibited, or the communication device. So they, according to our policy, should we choose to pass it, then that would be included. They would have to be off and out of sight.
So we're also in the prohibition is a tablet, but we're handing these kids tablets.
So the bottom item says not included in the prohibition is any electronic device provided by the school district.
Because as we discussed, the STAR exam.
Right, I
And I know
understand.
that's only one example, but yes, so it's a little, we can give them advice, but they can't bring their own personal device.
Or imagine going to one of the tech app classes or any of our computer type classes and you're not allowed to use anything in there. Of course you can. It's issued by us for some instructional reason. This is, I believe, Mr. Shoesmith, smartwatches and those types of things are actually listed in the law, correct?
Correct. It's
Those
the
are
fourth-
itemized in law.
Yes, sir.
Stating it must include telephones, cell phones, tablets, smartwatches, radio devices, paging devices.
That's
Well,
correct.
I'm aware of this and everything, and the reason why I'm asking this is because it's saying that in the prohibition is the telephone. If we're allowing the kids, during passing periods to use that, are we telling them that they have, to essentially leave your smartwatches at home, and the only thing you're allowed to have in your backpack is the telephone? This is where I think this could get very, very confusing, because they're going, well, you're letting me have the telephone, but you're not allowing me to have this over here. So are we going to spell this out? Does this mean that during our instructional time that the smartwatches have to be off their wrists and in their backpacks?
They have to be powered off and on their person or in their belongings. So, I mean, that's up to you and your family to decide if you want to take it with you and then just not have it turned on all day, or just leave it at home. So I think it's, again, here's the list of prohibited devices. Our policy says that you have to have it turned off and put away, and that's up to you to decide how you want to handle that. Gigi?
This is going one step further and maybe another discussion, but I can see our teachers using their cell phones. It's not part of this law at all, but that seems unfair. If, they're texting or whatever they're doing and our kids are not allowed to. Just, it's not for tonight, but I'm curious about that.
Well, Miss Gigi, if we're teaching, we're supposed to be teaching, not be texting on our telephones. As a principal, I addressed that multiple times with staff. That's unacceptable. You are in here to monitor students and deliver instruction. You shouldn't be. But sometimes, again, teachers would say, you know what, listen, my husband's sick or whatever. Okay, that's different, right? But no, if we're expecting our students to do these, we should be modeling those same types of behaviors to them.
What is the status of the legal update on this? Because currently the legal states that it only addresses pagers as our current legal policy.
I'll have to check with that. I'm not even sure if it's going to be in update 126 or not.
Okay.
Mr. Byer, again, this stuff there's so much of it. I mean, there really is. And it seems like Mr. Jacob and I talk, I'm like, oh, now we found something else. It's like, goodness, man.
I'm
like,
not criticizing it. I'm
No,
just
no.
curious if we knew if that was an updated piece of that was
They-
coming.
they
I
haven't
assume
told-
there will be, but.
They haven't told us a timeline.
Okay.
Like,
That's
I
fine.
attended a TASB webinar, but all it says is at a later date. They're hoping that there's a lot of this coming at the end of this month, but time will tell, right?
Well, I appreciate you all putting this together. I do have a small focus group in my own home that is going to have to abide by this, and my child appreciates the flexibility and the trust, and so having that two-way street between the teacher and the student to say, okay, I trust you to allow me to be responsible for this, and I'll give that trust back. So I think it's a good general policy. Let our local communities make the detailed decisions, and then as we come into potential issues or pitfalls with this, and we'll have to revise it and look at it at that time. So, any other questions or comments? All right. Do I have a motion to? Oh, yes, ma'am, Ms. Shelton.
Thank you. I'm going to end with this one because that might be a little bit of a stretch. On page 40, I just want to reiterate my under first-time offense possession of nicotine.
We're still on it.
Oh, I'm
Cell
sorry.
phones.
So, yeah,
Apologies.
we're still on
Moved ahead.
FNCE local.
Yes, sorry.
That's okay.
I have nothing.
Okay. All right. Do I have a motion to approve the, the presented updated board policy FNCE local.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Villarreal. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll go. Thank you, Ms. Cox. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Shoesmith.